evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Does it sound like the mic's on? It's low. Colin, can you help us? Is this better? Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our second Redistricting Advisory Committee meeting. I'm Shirley O'Brien, the Chief of Student Services and Community Relations, and we're happy to see you all here again this evening. We are going to be giving some presentations and doing some group work, so we're going to have you up and down a little bit tonight. But for now, we do want everybody now here in the boardroom chairs, just because the closer up you are, the better you're going to be able to see. Because as you know, Colleen has a lot of data to share with us, and it is sort of small. So we want you to be able to see as well as you can. I would like to invite Mr. Reese, our superintendent, to the podium just to say a few words. And then we will turn it over to Colleen to get started.
No need. Good afternoon, everyone. I really should be applauding for you for being here and thanking you for your time. This is our second meeting, so we're going to really start getting more into the details and depth, although you're like, well, what did we do last time? We saw all that data, right? But we are going to get a little bit more in depth, more into details, really looking at that elementary side. And I have to commend the team and our partner consultant with Colleen in really giving us some good options and really looking at this in a more equitable way and ensuring that we are impacting the least amount of students as we look at our boundaries, et cetera. So just wanted to say good evening, appreciate your time, looking forward to your input and then looking at where we are at the end of the meeting. So thank you very much. I'll turn it back over to the team.
First of all, I want to go over our agenda for today or for this evening. And so Colleen's going to be going over our elementary rezoning, and then we'll be doing a group activity looking at some maps and providing some feedback. Then we'll be having a presentation on NMAA, New Mexico Activities Association rules, and also on our open enrollment statute. Then we'll be doing a group activity on our transfer and open enrollment policy, JFB. And so, like I said, we are trying this evening to make sure you're not just sitting and listening this whole time. We do want your feedback and your participation. And so during the group work activities will be a great time. If you have any questions along the way, please let us know, and we'll do our best to stop and answer them at the time. So let me just go back real quick. Couple housekeeping things. Our restrooms are right on the corner, right outside this door. There's water and some snacks right outside. Please help yourselves as you need those. Please silence your cell phones if you haven't already. And if you didn't sign in, please head out real quickly back to the sign-in table because we're going to be putting you in some groups, and we need to make sure that we have everybody accounted for. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Colleen Martinez, the President and Senior Facility Manager for Visions in Planning, to discuss the elementary rezoning. Thanks, Colleen.
Thank you, Ms. O'Brien. Welcome, everybody. We're back this evening to talk about the elementary school zones. Let's see here. It's not showing up here. I broke it. That's what happens on Tuesdays. Oh, there we go. Since I can't see it here, I don't mean to put my back to anybody, but I just kind of want to talk a little bit about update of the new housing construction. We're going to talk a little bit about the impacted elementary zones and look at some of the proposed options, and we're going to do some group work around those proposed options. Okay? So between our last meeting and this meeting, we did spend some time, we did meet with the city and take a additional review of some of the housing and got some additional information. So we've updated our housing map as part of that. Again, we do have a lot of housing that's occurring here that's under construction in Las Cruces. You know, within the past 6 years, over 5,000 units. It's a lot of housing to have been constructed. Right now, there's over 1,000 units, almost 1,100 units on the market. So there's a lot for sale. And right now, we have 22 new housing developments that are in the process, with one of them just breaking ground last week up in the Monte Vista Elementary attendance zone. Some 144 units. So we know that with all the growth that is occurring, that especially up on the East Mesa, that we really need to be focused on what those attendance zones up in that area for the elementary schools, because we've got some schools that are very close to capacity up there, and so we're trying to build in some ability for future growth, knowing that those new units are coming. So again, looking at our map here, Monte Vista attendance zone has the largest number of new housing developments, then followed by Highland and some of the other areas. There's some still going on in Sonoma and stuff. So what we did is we really looked at where some of the growth is. We looked at where students reside and where they attend school, and we really tried to target only the areas that really needed adjustment. So I want to kind of take a look here at some of the proposed options for this. So when we look at the city, this is just an illustration of elementary students, and we can see where some of those concentrations are across the city. And when we start looking at the Northeast Mesa, you can really begin to see those heavy concentrations up in this area. And I do kind of want to back up and kind of reiterate that one of the reasons that we are looking at some of this rezoning is because of the opening of Columbia Elementary next year. And that school was specifically designed to help alleviate some of this overcrowding, because the district was able to get some funding from the state to help rebuild that school. So as part of the evaluation process, not only do we look at enrollment, we look at transfers, we look at the capacity of each school, all elementary schools. We also look at the utilization of each school, and we take a look at what, how each school is being used, what spaces are available. But then as part of the geocoding process, when we're able to identify where students reside, then we also then dig down deeper and we start looking at student demographics, so that our intention is to not make things worse, we want to try to make things better. And so as part of that process, one of the things that we do is we first start off right here and we look at where everybody is going right now, regardless of what attendance zone they're assigned to. And we know we have student transfers and stuff in there, so we take a look at what that is, and we look at the number of, you know, ethnic and racial demographics. We look at economically disadvantaged. We look at the number of ELL. We look at SPED and gifted and talented, so that we know how many are in each attendance zone. And this first column here is based on where everybody is going now. Then we look at where, if by where they live and each attendance zone and what that looks like, and we again analyze it from that as well. And then as we start making changes and looking at the options, we again look at it to make sure that we're not making it worse, or but we're trying to find ways to make it better. So we then look at, in the yellow here would be for option 1, and then we look at it again for option 2. And so as we go through and look at all of those things, we make sure that we're taking all of these into consideration before we start moving lines. So we really have 7 schools out of 25 elementary schools that we're looking at making adjustments. And so we're looking at Columbia Elementary, we're looking at Highland, we're looking at Monte Vista, Sonoma, Desert Hills. There's a minor change between Fair Acres and Mesilla. Just a very minor change there. But we drill down and look at all of these as part of that process as well.
Martinez, if I may, just everyone, I know this is a little bit hard to see. You will be getting handouts with a lot of this data as we do the group work. So you'll be having that. You could look at that a little bit better than up here. Just so you can see the work that goes behind to get where we're at with the data. So,
Mm-hmm. So when we look at these zones, again, what we're looking at is making sure that we look at where the current enrollment is now. This is with everybody going to, attending the current school that they're at. We look at what the number of students that reside in each attendance zone. We look at the capacity of the schools, both with portables and without portables. There's quite a few schools that don't have them, and some that were in that high growth area do have portables. Then we turn around and look at that. What does that look like once we start making adjustments to those boundaries? And then, so for example, Columbia Elementary has 332 students that reside within that attendance zone. And we're going to have a school that's going to be 768, I think, is the capacity on that. So we need to double that to be able to help alleviate some of the overcrowding. And then we take and go further in that and look at what the capacity, again, from that school, and then we look at what that zone change would potentially mean under option 1. We're looking at 723. And then we look at that, if we look at option 2, which I'll show, then we would have, and that zone does not change because one of the things that has to happen for Columbia is that we have to get that school as close to that number because of the funding that the district received. So that's one of the areas that we did, and when I show you the options, you'll see it. But the net change is about 500 students that are impacted out of over 10,000 elementary students. So about 4.9% of the district's elementary students are going to be impacted by these changes. So we really worked hard to try to keep that as minimal as possible. So I'm going to show the first part for the west side. This is Mesilla and Fair Acres. And right now this is just a very, very minor change. One of the things we want to try to do is we have, this is Interstate 10 right here, and then it goes here, and then we have a little pocket here. What we're trying to do is realign that. Right now, currently, we have 474 students that live within Fair Acres and 282 that live in Mesilla. This change only impacts 3 students. That's still 3 students that are impacted, but on a minimal side. For long term, this helps realign these 2 zones so that if housing is built down in anywhere in this area somewhere, the ability for Mesilla to be able to accommodate any potential future growth is possible because Fair Acres could not. So we're making that change to help realign that with the highway, and that is really a good barrier as a boundary for a school zone. We do enrollment projections, but you don't know who's going to move in next month, next week, next year. There's no way to actually predict that. What I did go back and do, because I had previous geocoding in that particular area, and I had 12 students, I'm down to 3 after 5 years. So that tells me that's an older area where that's at. And those are older elementary students. It's getting it all realigned with the highway there for future. There will be new families and stuff because there is some other developments that are being discussed in that area. And if we're making zone changes now, it's kind of easier to do all of it in one shot.
Martinez mentioned, as we're looking at this, the biggest piece is also that future growth, right? So as we're ranking, and again, keep in mind, these are recommendations, right? They have not been determined. These are the recommendations that are being brought forward. But looking for future growth. So as we're looking at those boundaries, that we also are keeping in mind, we may have an X amount of students, but for example, when you look at the Mesilla area, right, Ms. Martinez, there's some areas there that potentially will eventually have homes, right? And those homes will bring kiddos. Not every home that we're seeing as we look at the data, not every home that's being built also brings kiddos, but it does, you know, to a certain extent. So the one thing that we need to keep in mind is what's that potential growth and impacting. What we don't want to do is add an area to a school that's already getting to capacity, and there's still potential growth later on that we have to make adjustments later. We want to make sure we balance that as much as possible. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ms. O'Brien.
We're recording.
Oh, that's right.
So we have to use the mic, or else we
Yeah.
can't.
Yes, thank you for reminding me. So those are the things that we, you know, as we think through this, that we want to make sure that we keep in mind. So thank you, Ms. Martinez.
Right, and right here, this whole area, if anything comes up in this area here, then there's no way that Fair Acres could even begin to absorb 15, 20, 30, 40 kids that could potentially come out of that. So being able to fix it now does help for that future component. Wrong remote. So when you come back and you look at it, you can just see it's just realigned with the highway there. And that just kind of just smooths that out and gets rid of the little notch. And it just makes that as a good northern boundary there. And that boundary does extend all the way to the west to Deming's boundary. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the east side, because this is where we have 5 schools that we have to make adjustments to. And what I did is I turned on the students so you can see the concentration of students. We have Columbia right here. Right now, as I mentioned before, we have 332 students with a school that's going to have a capacity of 768. I have Highland right here. It has a capacity of 750 without the portables that are on site. But I have over 865 kids that live in that zone. So I have a disconnect between what the school can hold and the number of students that reside there. Plus, I have 4 housing developments ongoing in that area. Then I have Monte Vista right here. You can see where the concentration with Peachtree and all of this other stuff. And I've got 5 housing developments in this area. And I have currently 783 students there. The school without portables can only accommodate 600, and with portables, I can accommodate 855. And while portables can help expand the capacity of a school, you really don't want to have to depend on those significantly for general classroom use. If those are for special programs or other ancillary things, that's a better use of them. But when you're having multiple grade levels that are having to be housed out in portables, we want to try to see if we can kind of reduce that and bring that back in alignment. Looking at Sonoma, we have 659 residing in the zone. I have a couple developments in this area. This school without portables can accommodate 688. Again, we have a bunch of portables on that site, and we're trying to find a way to help bring that balance and get those kids inside the main building. And then Desert Hills, which just underwent a massive renovation and expansion, currently only has 483 students here. It has a capacity of 750. Again, this was another school that was the district received funding assistance from the state, so that way we could increase the capacity of this school. Because of the way that Sonoma was constructed, you just can't really come in and do a classroom addition. And so that was the intent, is that if we can adjust that boundary between Sonoma and Desert Hills, we can accommodate some of that growth there. So this is what it looks like without the kids. Again, I've just kind of identified where the how much the capacity is with the current number of students that reside in that zone. So then this is option one. Again, looking at how we are able to expand Columbia. The intent was always to bring the south boundary on the east side of I-25 south to help accommodate where some of these housing developments are. And so what we've been able to do is draw this down, and we're able to hit at 723, which is below the capacity of the school, but is significant enough that the state would be happy that we're gonna fill the school up that high. And we do have room for growth because some of these developments are currently under construction. Some of the houses have already been built and some are already purchased. So we know that we can accommodate some of the growth in this area. So with the expansion to the south here, we're able to pick up this big, large concentration of students and offload what is causing some of the overcrowding at Highland and put it into the brand new school that will be opening next fall. Then with, and one of the benefits here is we do have the underpass so that there is easy accessibility under the freeway to get over to Columbia Elementary. And then with Highland, we just didn't have enough capacity in Columbia to accommodate here. And so what we did is we have Highland here. And then over here on the east side of Sonoma Road, we expanded over into the Monte Vista zone. And in this area, underneath this option, what's nice about this area is we know that there is not going to be any more housing built in that area because it's already built out. We have some commercial developments in there, but when we look at how much capacity that we have in that school, we're able to draw down to 644. And with the school with the capacity of 750 without portables, we know that we have one development here and this area here is prime for development in the future. Then we're able to bring this school down under capacity to allow for future growth. And that buys the district some additional time for the future as those things expand. And then when we look at Monte Vista here, way far to the north where it goes to the district boundaries, pretty far, there's nobody that lives there. So we zoomed in here. With taking this chunk out that's right here, we're able to pull Monte Vista down to 613 students. And that is right there near the capacity without portables. We still are a little bit there with 855 where that school could be either targeted for a classroom addition at this point, which would be a smaller cost to the district, or looking at that future school in about 5 years. And so we also know with elementary school enrollment declining some, that this, we do feel that it does kind of help give some of that available capacity there. And then when we look at Sonoma, what we did is that right here, there is where the boundary was between Sonoma and Desert Hills. You can kind of see the difference in the color of the students. And so what we did is this neighborhood was split. We went ahead and ran that all the way up on both sides of Roadrunner. We have, there's a nice big arroyo right through here, and then all this area is zoned commercial. So we know no housing is gonna be built in there. So again, we know that we have available capacity here. This does take and increase this from in the 400s up to 569. So we know we have growth there available in Desert Hills because we have a lot of open area and space for the future. It also helps draw down Sonoma to 553, which is under its capacity for the existing building of 688. So just trying to really break it where it was a solid neighborhood. What we weren't trying to do is use the natural barriers where possible, a highway, a major street, or when we do come to neighborhoods where we have a full enclosed neighborhood, so we're not splitting those. And then when we look at option 2, there's only really one change that is with that with option 2 because of the way that everything had to balance. And that is right here looking at, oops, I went backwards, sorry, is going north instead of going to the east here underneath the previous option. What we've done is gone north. There is a huge development up here. There's a couple different home builders, but this totally encapsulates that so that that way no students are split up by a street or area, so they're all within one school zone. We know that there's going to be a housing development that's right up on the outside of that, but we know that if we come down here, we do have still some room for growth. This does increase the number of students for Highland, just a little bit more at 654, and again, it's still under its capacity, and it does draw down Monte Vista even closer at about 600, and that is at 603 compared to its capacity without portables at 603. So again, we've kind of really gotten that tighter and closer in to that. The other zones don't really change because there's no really other way to cut Columbia with its proximity, and you already currently have buses running in this area to come down and pick up, or have another bus come down in this area makes the most sense because we're also looking at transportation as part of this. So with that is between going to the east. And we looked at different ways that we could try to carve that down a little bit more for Monte Vista, but then I end up having to split neighborhoods. I really tried to figure that one out, and I just had a hard time with that. So again, these are very small targeted attendance zone changes. What we want to do is to break up into groups. Every group is going to get a copy of the maps, and what we're going to be doing is looking at some comments and feedbacks, anything that you see that's, you know, out there that we may not be aware of, and kind of get your response to some of those. And then what we'll do is we'll give about 10-15 minutes for that. About 10 minutes, actually, now I see the time. And we'll kind of report back in the various groups. We'll kind of see what everybody has come up with.
You do need the mic.
I'm curious, the thinking on Sunrise and Cesar Chavez, why we're not including them in how are they factoring in?
They're factored in such that they have available capacity. And they're two separate schools. And so they're calculated separately because of that. We know we have a large pre-K population at Cesar Chavez that could be drawn down to some of the other schools if need be. And to be able to accommodate, let's say, more K or pre-K for that area. So that's what we looked at.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to give you your groups. We have 6 groups. Group 1 is going to be here. Group 2, and there's little numbers on each table. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is out in the lobby, and 6 is just past the security doors here. And Colin, if you could flip over to the slide that has the group names, just so everybody can see. So Group 1 is going to be Lisa L, Noel M, Tegan D, Manny G, Vanjie Barella, Sergio M, and Ella C. So you're Group 1 right here. Group 2 is going to be Monty, David, Steve, Laura, Wendy, Brunson, Maya, and Patrick, Mr. Nolan. And you're right there. Group 3 will be right back here, and that's going to be Sharon, Cynthia, Makai, Elias, Alexa, Sarah, and Ben, right here, Group 3. Group 4, Natalia, Eric, Michelle, Andrea, Aaliyah, Xochi, and Teresa Tenorio are right here, Group 4. Group 5 will be out in the lobby. Julie, Dana, Kelly, Elena, Colin, Kennedy, and Ethan. And then right beyond the security doors here, Karen, Michelle, Edwanda, Natalie, Lana, Tyson, and Addison.
So as a way to save time, if you can make sure that you have your comments written on your maps, please, it would really help us. And then we're going to go ahead and start a report out. So that we can move on to some other things. Do I have another group? Or is that the only group that was missing? Okay. See, she got them so far off track that they were. Please make sure that you put your comments down on the maps, please, because we're going to collect those. Okay, so can we get with group 1? Do you have somebody that you can have report out? Or maybe Shirley. So let's hear what group 1 has. Group 1. So let's hear what group 1 has.
So we had a lot of things to say, and we didn't have the correct map at the beginning, so we just wrote a lot of stuff. And also, I'll just grab all the stuff that we wrote down. Will we be revising transfer policies when we do open up new schools and new things, especially Columbia, because it's nice and shiny and everyone will want to go there? If a new school is a possibility in the next 5 years, where would it go? The Redhawks growing out there.
That would be definitely is an area that we're evaluating that would be targeted in the next, 5 years.
New schools, yeah.
Yeah, we know.
I'll do this one. Columbia has the potential to reach or exceed capacity quickly. Shiny new school, transportation issues resolved. Will some families elect to keep their students at current schools and keep their
Right, and that's something I think we're going to be starting to talk about in this next part of the meeting this evening.
Okay. Jornada, can this school be used to help with balancing some of our east side schools? No?
No, we looked at that and it's in a good place where it's at.
We wrote some stuff, pre-K at Booker T. Absorb Columbia's students. Will pre-K be moved back?
Yes, there's pre-K classrooms at Columbia.
And lots of students at Columbia. Okay, is this one? Oh, no, that was just general. And what's this one? Leave room for growth so what we thought overall, we had the balancing and the growth one. So we thought that the balancing was just a short-term solution. The young ladies over here were really awesome. They thought that the balancing was just short-term and it wouldn't help. That leaving room in some areas for the growth was a much better solution than balancing out.
Thank you, and if you'll just put those all on your maps, we'll collect those at the end. Okay, group 2, if you have something different than what group 1 said, will you please share that out?
The main question we had were for when the boundary shift happens for current 5th graders to stay at their current school versus being forced to the new school.
And that's going to be something that will, again, be discussed as part of transfer policies and some of those changes and stuff.
Okay, group 3, if you have something different than 1 and 2 said.
So we looked at some pros and cons between option 1 and B and some specifics. where, with, for example, transportation and traffic congestion would possibly be less with the east growth, which would be option 1. There was a concern about a roundabout on Thurman and Sonoma Ranch that should be considered, especially since we had our bus coordinator with us, so that was helpful. And then also, drawing the boundaries eastbound would also possibly make it easier route for the Monte Vista grouping. We looked at Peachtree Hills, whereas if we did with option 1, those students on Peachtree Hills would go to Monte Vista, whereas in option 2, they would have to go all the way down to Highland. So we thought that would be something that should be considered. And then just an aha question, when will we learn about the ripple effect these options will have on middle school and high school?
That's next meeting.
Okay, that's what we thought.
Okay, group 4. Who's your speaker? Awesome.
Wondering about the policy for special education transfers within the district and consideration of safe routes to school.
Lastly, just that the 4.9%, at least our understanding, is students who are who live in these zones but not necessarily are attending in these zones, if that's our understanding is correct.
No, those are the kids those are the numbers of students, like where if you see where Columbia is existing, where it's just a narrow strip, I'm going to just use that as a good example, on the east side of I-25. When it goes south, there's a few hundred students in that area that are assigned to Highland that would now go to Columbia, though that is a chunk of the 500 right there. They may be somewhere else. It's based on where they reside, not necessarily where they currently attend.
And that's what we sought that clarification in our group.
Okay.
Thank you. Group 5. You guys are 5, right? Who's your Kelly? Who's the?
It's not always Kelly. We had one different consideration that we had was a concern for Jornada and how some of these shifts would maybe stifle the population at Jornada, and we'd asked a couple of questions about population and they're not quite at capacity, and so would this shift kind of cause that school to die out a little bit, and would it qualify for funding in the future? How does that impact Jornada, and could we shift some of those boundaries to maybe bolster some population there? And then again, how would it impact the feeder pattern in the future, and could those, if we moved the population to Jornada, would that help feed Mayfield?
And some of that's going to be addressed.
Please make sure please make sure you write it down and put it on the maps, because we'll be collecting all of this for.
Yeah, and just
For us
as
to
a side note,
consider.
we do have quite a few schools that have been declining in enrollment across the board. There's just not enough students.
Our first concern was what they said, balancing rather than planning for the future. We felt like that was a big concern, especially with the Monte Vista. It's really growing out there towards the Red Hawk area, so we feel like we need to definitely plan for the future rather than balance now. But one concern that we had for option 2 that made it sound better was it broke up less neighborhoods, moving it more north, because we feel like it's really important for students, especially at a young age, to build relationships with friends, and I feel like that's harder to do when you break up neighborhoods and send them to different schools, because they go home and they're like, I don't really know this kid, like he doesn't go to my school. So that was our main reason we went with option 2.
Thank you so much.
So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. O'Brien.
Sounds good. So we'll be taking all of this feedback and compiling it so that we have it to reference as we continue to move through the process. Colin, can you put my presentation back up? Okay. And will you click for me, because it's not clicking. Okay, we need to go back. Sorry. So at this time, I'm going to call up Michelle Ranga, our Executive Director of Athletics, and she's going to go over NMAA policies so that when we get ready to talk about our transfer and open enrollment policy, we all have the background knowledge to kind of make some recommendations on the policy. So Michelle, I'll turn it over to you. There we go.
Thank you. I also want to make sure Bobby Campos, who's my partner in crime during the week, also helped put this together. We talked to NMAA, so I just wanted to make sure you knew he was here. And shout out to Monty and Miss Fierro for the Hawaiian Tropical Tuesday. So I'm not the only one. Okay. So we wanted to start by showing you all of the student groups that are impacted by NMAA. Oftentimes the misconception is that it's only our student athletes. As you can see, we have almost twice as many activities as we do athletic teams. So this is not just an athletic issue, it's also impacting our student groups who are all sanctioned, which means they have to follow eligibility, they have to submit for eligibility, they have competition rules and all of those pieces. So it's more than just our athletic groups. Last year for 23-24, Centennial High School had 1,594 students who participated in a sport or a activity. Las Cruces High School had 1,995. Mayfield High School had 1,364. Oregon Mountain had 2,234. Some of those could be dual, that they're involved in more than one thing. The largest group with 2 sports was Oregon Mountain with about just shy of about 120. But these numbers, I'm sure Dr. Wendy and Shirley can scan these and put them up, but we just got them this morning, so I apologize that they're not projected. So these are terms that are defined by NMAA. So just kind of, and they kind of are gonna jump back and forth on the different screens, but the first one is open enrollment, which we're gonna be talking about, I believe, later with Dr. Wendy. I'm gonna start with 9th graders. So 9th graders who are first time competing at the high school level based on statute are eligible for open enrollment. This is a 9th grade student who has not previously competed in a sport at the high school level. Now, 8th graders, the reason we have that on there is because we do have a group of 8th graders who are eligible for sports in Las Cruces Public Schools. They are individual sports, tennis, wrestling, swimming, track only if they've run cross country though, and golf. Okay, so we do have, each campus does have some 8th graders who participate in sports. So typically when we think of open enrollment, we're thinking of 9th graders. Our 8th graders, if they are participating in athletics, we require them, they are only participating at the school they are zoned, high school they are zoned to attend. So for example, if they live in the Las Cruces High School district, they can only golf in the Las Cruces High School, at Las Cruces High School. So that's how our rules stand for current 8th graders. I'm gonna come back to this statement at the bottom because it won't make sense until I go over the next slide. Bona fide residence. So another consideration of NMAA is if someone is what's considered a bona fide residence or a bona fide move. So a bona fide move is Julie Woyko lives in Section A, she physically moves to Section B, and she has a lease or a rental agreement that shows that. So they have to provide documentation showing that they've actually moved in that zone and that they have the paperwork to support that. Transfers who move into a zone but live in a residence that's not their parent or guardian. An example of that, we often have families who coexist for financial reasons. So they have specific paperwork they have to file with the registrar, but that would also be another example of a group like maybe they're experiencing housing insecurity and had to collapse one of their households and combine households. So that would be another example. So students, so now I can go back to the other slide. So if a student uses open enrollment at the 9th grade level, and they go to a school they are not zoned to attend. So student lives in the Las Cruces High School district, but wishes to go to Mayfield and submits the proper paperwork, following open enrollment, following all of that, and they are enrolled at Mayfield. If the student goes to Mayfield and then chooses to go back to the school they are zoned to attend, so it gets a little complicated, but so they were zoned to attend the other school, they are considered a transfer. If they open enroll to go to that other school, they are not considered a transfer. I don't know if that was more complicated than it was worth, but it gets a little complicated. So if a student attends a school and then wishes to go back to the homeschool that they were zoned to attend, they are not considered bona fide residents because they have used what's called their first choice, their open enrollment choice to attend that school. So here's what defines a transfer. So a transfer is someone who's residing outside of the school's attendance zone or are coming back after an open enrollment choice. Okay, so they live outside the zone or they're coming back to that. That student is immediately eligible for sub-varsity competition if they left that previous school in good standing. And the reason it says sub-varsity is because some of our athletics in Las Cruces Public Schools have a C team as well as a JV team. So anything that is not varsity, so C or JV. So they're eligible to play sub-varsity immediately. If they leave their current school in good standing, but they are a transfer, and this is the important part we need to make sure that we all understand, that student is ineligible for varsity for 365 calendar days, okay? Seniors who are a transfer may not compete at the sub-varsity level. NMAA rules say that seniors may not participate other than on a varsity level. So if a student were to transfer junior to senior year, they would be in a position where they wouldn't be able to compete if they didn't make a varsity level sport. If someone fails to fails to provide the paperwork or falsifies paperwork, which happens, they are investigated through NMAA and they are immediately suspended if it's found to be true that they have falsified that information from all athletic activities for 365 calendar days. We spoke to NMAA. Mr. Campos and I called Sally Marquez. She's the current director of NMAA, and their recommendation is that current athletes stay at their current schools because of the fact that they've already established on that team, represented that school. They've met that open enrollment piece. They've participated on that campus, including an 8th grader, because we do have 8th graders who participate at a varsity level sometimes, especially for something like golf or tennis. So that is their recommendation. Of course, that's a board voted determination, but that is their recommendation. And again, our 8th graders are only currently participating where they're zoned. We had a phone call yesterday, just for perspective. We had an 8th grade parent inquiring if my student goes to a school right now to play a spring sport, an individual spring sport, what will happen to them next year if they are rezoned? So that's a consideration. There's no answer that I can give them right now because that, again, is going to be determined by the board, but that is something that's why the NMAA is saying if a student is attending somewhere, it could impact all the way down to those 8th graders. Mr. Campos, how many 8th graders would you say we have? 30 at the most? So just for perspective on the numbers of 8th grade participation. Just for perspective on enrollment time, as anytime there's changes, there's always settling, right? That has to take place with people getting settled in their new spots. So the enrollment timeline provided by NMAA says that students have to be enrolled by the 10th day of the semester to be considered for immediate athletic eligibility. So if someone decides after 14 days of school that, you know what, I'm gonna go back to that school or I'm gonna go to that other zone school, they would not meet the NMAA timeline for eligibility for sports. Clear as mud, all the time. NMAA rules are clear as mud. And Bobby and I are happy to stand for any questions that you might have. Those are NMAA rules, they're not district rules. And those are and that document, we kind of joke, it's a nice eligibility guide, but for every 10 transfers we get, 2 fall on that sheet. The other 8 have some sort of an anomaly or some sort of a hardship or some sort of a petition, so they're typically not that straight and narrow. Yes, ma'am. So that's the information that the board will decide on. So we did ask Ms. O'Brien, since we only have 2 board members present on the committee, if they needed us to present this to the whole board so we could answer all of their questions that were available to do so. So the NMAA rules, and Bobby, correct me if I'm wrong, but, and Eric, you too, because you know the high school rules well. The NMAA rules are the NMAA rules. We have no bearing on their rules. So what they set as parameters are their parameters. That would be, I guess at that point, a student would file a hardship if that was the determination that was made, which has not been made yet, but that would be the steps they would take to go through their protocol to be considered.
But they also have, put some guidelines in for hardship.
Yes.
Where there will be exceptions, certain ones, financial being one of them, things of that nature. So there's only one or two exceptions to that they can accept the hardship.
Yes, ma'am. They now do the hearings bi-weekly, I believe. So every other week they do them. And when I say they, it's not, we are not part of that. So they have a board who does the hardship eligibility determination. So they do hearings every other week via Zoom. Not necessarily. It just depends. It depends on, it could, but they'd have to have their, it's 10 days from, they have to be heard within 2 weeks of being filed. Yeah, the outcomes come to us fairly quickly, usually within 24, 48 hours. No, please. Do you mean through NMAA or through LCPS? So that would be a question to take to the board or make sure the board is aware that that's a concern, because that's not something I can answer.
And when we get to working on the policy, these are all questions that we need to write down so that we can make sure the board knows these are all things that we want to be considered. So when we get to this point, we'll be able to give your feedback.
And we did include that slide based on our phone call with NMAA, that was their recommendation. We just don't have any control over the outcome at this point.
And just because we're, again, short on time, I want to go ahead and have Wendy, Dr. Miller Tomlinson, come on up so that she can talk a little bit about the statute. And then hopefully we'll have a few minutes to start working on the policy, and we'll pick it up again.
Thank you, Michelle and Bobby. I know you have to go to soccer, or you can stay here too. We're just going to talk very quickly about the statute. So the school board has an open enrollment policy. The school board's policy is based on New Mexico statute. So it's very straightforward. I'm just going to go over it briefly, what the statute says, and if you have any questions, and then Shirley, there's an activity after this. Okay, we're gonna see where we are. So this is from New Mexico statutes, and it's the section 22, which is about public education. So, and it lays out the priorities, and it starts with the number 3 here. The first part really talks about how attendance zones and how to draw lines and stuff like that. So priorities for enrollment, the first priority, obviously, students that reside in the school district. So students that live within Las Cruces Public School have priority for enrollment, and that also applies to attendance zones. So when we look at attendance zones, students that live in those attendance zones also have first priority to enroll in those schools. The second priority are students who previously attended a school, and again, that is largely for academic continuity, student familiarity with the school. And then there's some language in there about expulsions and re-enrollment, and then it picks up again in section F, talking more about enrollment and re-enrollment. And if you look at the last sentence in that first paragraph, it says the additional enrollment preferences may include, and then there are a list. After-school childcare, childcare for siblings, children of employees employed at the public school, extreme hardship, location of a student's previous school, siblings of students already attending the school, and student safety. So in the LCPS regulation, these are stipulated as priority transfer conditions. So if a student has a sibling at a school, a parent that works at the school, if there are child care issues, transportation issues, safety issues, those are considered priority as long as there's capacity. It's always based on the capacity of the school. There has to be enough physical space in the school, and there has to be enough staff in the school to accommodate additional students. So those are the things. Also, military students also have preferential enrollment, as do students in foster care and students that are homeless. So accommodating the needs of those groups of students are also part of the priority criteria under this statute. And that's all for the statute. I'll stand for any questions that you have. Right. So statutorily, that would be through legislative action to ask your legislator, to consider making a change to the legislation. There, at the local level, you can also advocate for change to the policy. This legislation says may include, so certainly at the local level, we could consider other groups as needed.
On 8th grade open enrollment, does that allow 8th graders to pick anywhere they want to go to high school to attend that high school?
So it depends on capacity. So, and one of the reasons for looking at redistricting is Columbia, right? So we have a new school being built that we need to fill, but it's also to alleviate overcrowding. So at different schools, and Organ Mountain being one of those schools, how do we get our high schools into better balance? And so really some years there's been a fewer number of transfers, and so it makes sense to let students go where they choose. Other years it would really put us out of balance because there's a large number of students that want to go to a particular school. So it really is about the numbers and the capacity. That would be part of it, yes. And so then the other consideration is, do we keep these priority considerations as part of the local transfer policy? Because statutorily we don't have to, because it says it may include these. And in the past, when the board passed the policy, they did include these priorities. So that's a great question. Thank you. Sure, yeah, I believe we can, you know, enrollment fluctuates, so it may be depending on, you know, we do, the transfer window is in the spring, and we do it early because that's also when we do staffing. So we need to look at how many students are graduating, how many students are coming in, what is the school staffed for. So all those things are part of that consideration. Now, when you get to the fall, there may have been some attrition at some point where maybe all the students that we projected to enroll in a school, maybe they all didn't enroll, maybe they moved, maybe they went somewhere else. So it is fluctuating. And do we still have that dashboard, that enrollment dashboard? So there is an enrollment dashboard on the website where you can see that district-wide and also by school. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Yes.
Talk about school capacity, that's based on staffing limits. Yes?
Correct.
Not school capacity where the staff is.
Correct. Right. Right. Because if we have empty rooms, if there's no teachers in them, then we can't put kids in them, obviously. Thank you, Mr. Womble. That's a good question. Any other questions? Okay. Back to you, Shirley.
We have 5 minutes. So we keep trying to get to this policy and get your feedback on it. So if you're okay, let's go ahead and get back in our groups. And what we would like you to do is, let me just give you a quick little preface here though. I want to reiterate that it is our board that governs our policies. Of course, we all provide feedback. You see they're posted on our website for people to give feedback. We're required to read them a minimum of 3 times so the public can give comments. So our job is to make recommendations as the Redistricting Advisory Committee. I don't make these decisions. Mr. Reese does not make those decisions. The school board, this is their purview to make these decisions. Colin, it went away? Okay, thank you. And so when we're looking at the policy, we really want you to consider all the stakeholders, not just your child. We need you to consider our special education students, our students that participate in activities and athletics. Consider our bilingual students. We just want you to consider all of our students that go to our district. You have to look at this with an open mind. So if you don't mind, we'll give you just because all of this information is fresh that we've just shared with you, if you could just get in your groups and just kind of look at a few of these questions. What are the strengths of the policy? Where can improvements be made? And how does the policy affect different stakeholders, either in a positive or negative way? But if you would just quickly get in your groups, like I said, well, it's still fresh on your mind, and we won't report out, but we'll collect your data, and then we'll share out at our next meeting on the 30th. Okay? Thank you. Okay, everybody, if I could just have your attention for a quick moment. I think our 2 groups out there, if we could have them come back in. Just want to give you a little bit of information as we wrap up, so let us get the other 2 groups in. Okay, I want to thank you all for your attention this evening, for your thoughtful participation, your feedback. That's what this group is all about. Collectively, we can provide the input that's needed to make this successful for the district, and so that we can give the right feedback to the board. Couple things. How would everybody feel if we bump this meeting to 2 hours next time? So we do the 5:30 to 7:30 or 5 to 7? Is there anybody that couldn't make it at 5? Oh, it starts at 7:15? How about 5:15? Could we do 5:15 to 7:15? Just to give us, I feel like we're always short about 30 minutes and we're right in the middle of something. So if we could do 5:15 to 7:15, and I'll send you all a reminder next time, and that is October 30th. And up on the screen, we just have some important dates to remind you of. Next time we'll be talking about, we'll start with the policy so that you all can meet for a few minutes with your group again and then report out. And then Colleen will be sharing middle school and high school data. So that's going to be really important. And then we also are going to be putting out a survey to our families, and we want to make sure that we get your feedback on that. So those are the 4 agenda items that we have for next time. So it's some heavy work, but we can do it. As a reminder, the stakeholder survey will go out November 1st to 15th after we get your input on the 30th. November 6th, we'll be having feeder pattern meetings with Oregon Mountain and Centennial, and then on Thursday the 7th, we're gonna have Mayfield and Las Cruces High. And then on November 13th, we'll have our final meeting using all the feedback you've given us to look at those 2 options that we can share with the board at hopefully their retreat that's coming up, or their extended work session that's coming up in November, and then they'll make a final vote hopefully in December. The other thing I wanted to tell you is the dashboard that we mentioned earlier. It is not on the website, but we are currently working on it, on building capacities and enrollment. So as soon as we have that up, we will also let you know. If there's anything on the policy that you want to make sure you don't forget, please take a Post-it note, jot it down, put it in your folder, bring it back next time. And we'll collect all the folders so that we have it, and we'll keep you in the same groups for next time, so you can just pick up right where you left off in 2 weeks. So we'll plan on 5:15 to 7:15 on October 30th. Yes, President? We need to end at 7. Okay, well, that'll give us an extra 15 minutes, so we'll take it. Yeah, we'll take it. I think we need to do 5:15 because not everybody can make it at 5. Yeah, we need to do 5:15 to 7, okay? All right, thank you so much. And if you'll just leave all the stuff on the table, we will come around and collect it right now. Thank you. Have a good evening.